The storm came out of nowhere. One moment, the skies above the Atlantic were calm, the sun stretching soft golden rays across the endless horizon, and the next, the aircraft was swallowed by a wall of darkness that felt more like a nightmare than weather. Passengers clutched their armrests as the Airbus A330 rattled and shook. Thunder cracked so violently that it seemed to split the sky in half, and lightning forked in jagged bursts so close that the cockpit's windshield flashed like a strobe. At 36,000 feet, engines roared and screamed in protest as hail pummeled the fuselage. The seatbelt signs had been turned on long ago, but by now, no one needed reminding. Every heart on that aircraft pounded in unison, beating against the fear of what might come next. In the cockpit, Captain Elena Ramirez's hands remained steady on the yoke, her eyes scanning instruments as her mind ran scenarios faster than the storm itself could change. She was calm, so unnervingly calm that even her first officer, a man 20 years younger and fresh into his long-haul career, stared at her with something that resembled awe more than fear. "Left engine surging, Captain," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "We've lost thrust." The plane jolted hard to one side, throwing several passengers into cries of alarm. The oxygen masks dangled in their orange cases above every head, a cruel reminder of the fragility of flight. Elena's voice, however, cut through the chaos like steel wrapped in silk. "We still have one good engine. Stay with me. We'll make it through this." Her words weren't just for the man beside her. They seemed to hang in the air, reaching through the cockpit door, piercing the fear that had spread like wildfire through the cabin. She had that kind of voice, one that could steady hands, quiet trembling, and make people believe that the impossible could be endured. The storm intensified, slamming the Airbus again, until the right engine sputtered. The alarms wailed, passengers screamed. For the first time, the first officer's eyes widened in naked panic. Both engines had flamed out. The world outside was nothing but darkness, rain, and lightning. Inside, gravity itself seemed to tilt, pulling the plane downward in a slow, horrifying fall. And then, something happened. Elena Ramirez closed her eyes for half a second, the way a painter might pause before the final stroke of a masterpiece. When she opened them again, she wasn't just a commercial airline captain. She was someone else. "Trim for glide. We've still got lift," she said firmly, her fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of someone who had stared down death before and walked away. "We're going to treat this like a dead stick landing. You with me." The younger pilot swallowed, nodded, and followed her lead. The aircraft descended, carving its way through the belly of the storm. The radio crackled with static, and for a while, there was nothing, no communication with air traffic control, no hope of outside help. Just a steel bird plunging toward an uncertain fate. Yet Elena guided it with hands as sure as a surgeon. She maneuvered into the eye of the storm, using instincts that weren't born in a civilian cockpit but forged in places where hesitation meant never returning home. The Airbus broke through the clouds, the storm still raging around it but calmer in the center. Below them, stretching out like a gray slate, was the ocean. "Nearest landmass is still over 100 miles out," the first officer whispered, sweat glistening at his temple. "We won't need it," she said. "I've done this before." The words hung heavy, strange, almost out of place. Done this before. How could anyone have done this before? But there was no time to ask. The aircraft skimmed, lower, slicing through turbulence, and every passenger inside clung to prayer. Some cried, some whispered names of loved ones, and others closed their eyes, waiting for the inevitable. Yet what came was not the crash they feared. With a breathtaking display of skill, Elena angled the descent, leveled the wings, and brought the massive aircraft down on the surface of the Atlantic in what pilots call a ditching maneuver. The fuselage screamed as it hit the water, bouncing once, twice, and then sliding to a halt in a spray of seawater that drenched the windows. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, when people realized they were alive, that they had survived, cheers, sobs, and applause filled the cabin. The Airbus floated miraculously intact. Evacuation began swiftly, and under Elena's calm orders, 236 passengers and crew made their way onto life rafts, shivering, stunned, but alive. The world would call it a miracle. But for Elena, it was something else, a memory. Hours later, As Coast Guard helicopters appeared on the horizon and the passengers were lifted to safety, word began to spread. The mysterious captain who had landed an airliner on the ocean without a single loss of life had a past no one expected. It started as whispers among rescuers, then reporters, then finally, officials who arrived to question her. "Captain Ramirez," one of them said, his tone cautious but tinged with respect, "we know who you are. Or rather, who you used to be." Elena, exhausted and soaked in seawater, simply met his gaze. "Then you know why I couldn't let them die." Her story unraveled like a secret long buried. Years before she ever wore the crisp uniform of a commercial airline captain, Elena had flown something very different, an F-22 Raptor, the most advanced fighter jet in the world. She had been one of the first female pilots in her squadron, a woman who broke barriers not just with talent but with sheer courage. Her call sign, whispered even now with reverence by those who had served with her, was Valkyrie. She had seen combat. She had faced split-second decisions where hundreds of lives depended on her steady hands. She had flown missions so classified that they remained buried in files the public would never see. And she had walked away from it all. Not for lack of skill, not for lack of courage, but because she had grown tired of war, tired of destruction, and longed instead to fly people safely to their destinations, not toward danger. But as fate would have it, her past had returned, not in the form of war, but in the form of a storm and a crippled airliner carrying hundreds of souls who depended on her. News channels exploded with the story. Commercial pilot saves 236 passengers in daring ocean landing. But soon after came the headlines that made jaws drop. Hero captain once Top Gun F-22 fighter pilot. Her old squadron mates, now scattered across bases and retired lives, saw her face on the screen and felt a swell of pride. Messages poured in. One even joked, of course it was her. No one else could have pulled that off. Passengers who had been on the flight spoke of her as if she were something more than human. A mother described how Elena's voice over the intercom calmed her terrified daughter. A businessman admitted he had thought his life would end in that storm, only to realize that someone up front had fought for him like family. But the moment that truly cemented her legend came a week later, at a small press conference where she was asked the question directly. A reporter leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Captain Ramirez, when the engines failed, what were you thinking?" She took a long breath, her gaze steady, her voice soft but unwavering. "I was thinking of the people who trusted me. The families, the children. I wasn't going to let them down. Flying isn't about glory, it's about responsibility. Whether you're in a fighter jet defending the skies or a commercial aircraft taking families home, you carry lives in your hands." That day, it wasn't about my past. It was about their future. Her words silenced the room, echoing far beyond its walls. In the weeks that followed, Elena returned to her quiet life, reluctant to step into the spotlight despite the world's fascination. She resumed her duties, still flying, still greeting passengers with a warm smile as they boarded. Some recognized her and whispered excitedly. Others had no idea that the woman in the captain's seat was the reason 236 people had been given a second chance at life. Yet every once in a while, at cruising altitude, when the world outside the cockpit window stretched wide and endless, she would think back to that storm, to the silence of the engines, to the moment when she chose to fight not with missiles or maneuvers but with calm, courage, and unshakable belief. And she would smile, knowing that the skies had given her one more chance to be what she was always meant to be, a protector. The legend of Captain Elena, Valkyrie, Ramirez lived on, not because she sought it, but because every person who stepped off that doomed flight carried it with them. Parents told their children about her bravery. Survivors gathered every year to remember the miracle. And fellow pilots spoke her name with respect, a reminder that skill and courage know no boundaries. She never considered herself a hero. But for the 236 souls she saved, and for the countless lives they went on to touch, she was more than that. She was proof that even in the darkest storm, someone can stand unshaken, wings spread wide, ready to carry others to safety. And so, high above the world, in the quiet hum of engines that never faltered again, Captain Elena Ramirez continued her journey, not as a warrior, not as a legend, but as a guardian of the skies, forever etched in the hearts of those who lived because of her. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary heroes are the ones who never ask to be remembered but are impossible to forget.